Josh, we good? Okay, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Ronnie. That's right. We're already done there? Robertson. Oh, sorry.
He's starting on time.
A bit late, actually. Okay, so today is week 6, and it's still in the series of Let Them, but actually we're going to do something a little bit different today. I'll soon explain. But a couple of things first. First of all, just a bit of a review from last week, which will lead into what we want to talk about today. Last week we covered the chapter about being intimidated or being under the control of what other people think about us and so on, which is a very bad thing, to be defined by what other people think. So we talk about the let them part, which is let them criticize, let them judge, let them be upset, all that kind of stuff, which is good. It's letting go of control, their control over us, so to speak. And then we talked about the let me, in other words, do what makes you, what she explained, do what makes you good, do what makes you feel proud, feel good, and so on. But the really emphasized point of last week's discussion was that one thing, that although the formula and the tool is really fantastic, but one thing that's really missing from the book is the concept of value-based living. And therefore the let me is very important if it means taking responsibility, owning the story. But but it's not about just making it work for you. That's not what it's about. It's about taking responsibility not to do what you want or what works for you, but taking responsibility to do what's right, what's moral, what's ethical, what makes the world a better place, what makes relationships better, and following our values that guide our living. Okay. Now, we only did a part of the book, but the point is there, the point we've covered. She has lots of different let me scenarios of relationships and dealing with difficult people and all kinds of things, which is very good. But it is the last week, this week, so I was going to do this next week, but then I decided to go to America next Thursday, so there's no class next Thursday. So this is the last one. So I wanted to do something on Pesach, because it is Pesach in 2 weeks. The Seder is last night, 2 weeks. So I want to share with you an idea, a concept, in a very different way, but still connected actually to the let them and let me idea. Before I do that, I just want to say that the next series is going to start the 23rd of April. So we're having a bit of a break now, after today. It's a long term next week. Next term it'll go for quite a while. But I'll send out, you please come in. I'll send out all the reminders, etc. I actually have a topic. I'm quite organized this time. Look at that. The topic of next term is 10 paths for a meaningful life, and it's timeless wisdom from the 10 Commandments. I thought we'd look at an ancient Jewish text for once and learn some important lessons. The reason why I'm doing it next term is because next term also has Shavuot, which is the festival where we receive the 10 Commandments. So I thought we'd use them to actually, well, they're self-explanatory as commandments, but more or less, but we'll take them also to understand how they enhance our life, what the lessons we can learn from them, and so on and so forth. So that's 23rd of April. But I'll send out all the things, yes, of course. Now, when we talk about, we'll come back to let them and let me in a second, but enhancing the point we spoke about last week. But we've talked about many times throughout the years that Pesach is not a history ritual. Actually, no Jewish festival is. It's about re-experiencing what happened. And therefore the Seder, which we have on Pesach, really is supposed to be experiential. What that means is it's supposed to be something that we experience, not we remember. The point of remembering in Judaism is to re-experience and to learn lessons and so on. And of course, we've talked about this many, many times, but the point of Pesach really is freedom. Freedom means freedom from ourselves, from our own prison, from our own incarceration, not to be trapped by our own prison, by our own limitations, by our own inhibitions, by our own constraints and so on and so forth, but to be able to go beyond ourselves and to connect to something greater than ourselves, something higher, something purposeful, something meaningful, something godly, and so on. So I want to develop this idea and talk about a certain interesting concept that is in the Seder, and then bring it back to this whole idea. And then share with you a very beautiful insight that I just learned this week. We know that on the Seder, one of the big mitzvahs of the Seder, of course, is to eat matzah, right? We say the Haggadah, we tell a story, but also to say the Haggadah, to tell a story, but then to eat matzah. Shmura matzah, right, of course. By the way, if anyone doesn't have any shmura matzah for the Seder, please let me know, and we can help you out. And we have 3 matzahs, right? There's 3 matzahs at the Seder, both nights. And there's 4 cups of wine. That's another very important part of the Seder, 4 cups of wine. And then there's, of course, other mitzvahs like eating maror, the bitter herbs, to remember the bitter times, and other customs and so on. But the eating matzah is really, really very central, and the Haggadah is central, but saying the Haggadah using the 4 cups of wine at every juncture, right? So we make Kiddush on the first cup, then we say the Haggadah on the second cup, we bench on the third cup, we say Hallel, and then we drink the 4th cup, and so on. So why is there 3 matzahs? Anyone else? Why do we have 3 matzahs all of a sudden? It's good. Right, so there's many reasons. Kohen, Levi, and Israel. There's also, by the way, a very simple halachic reason. And that is because every Shabbat and every Chag, it's just general knowledge, I thought I'd stick in a little bit. Right, every Shabbos and every Chag, we have two challahs, right? A matzah is like a challah, same sort of idea. But it's called Lechem Mishnah. The idea every Shabbat and every Chag is not just to have 2 challahs, it's got to be 2 complete challahs. Right? We don't eat sliced challah on Friday night. I mean, we slice it afterwards, but we don't buy sliced challah. Why? Because you're supposed to have, especially on Friday night, 2 complete whole challahs, right? Sorry?
Why?
Why 2 or why whole?
Why whole?
Actually, yeah, because the 2 challahs is to remember the double portion of manna that used to fall in the desert on Friday because it didn't fall on Shabbat, and whole because of the honor of Shabbos. Even during the week, by the way, if you have, let's say, a half a bagel and a whole bagel, and you want to make a blessing on bread, preference is to make on a whole piece. It's a respect for the bracha, but it has a particular importance on Shabbos because of the remembrance of the 2 meals. It's like 2 complete challahs. That's the idea. The 2 portions of manna were like 2 meals essentially. And this idea of making a blessing on 2 challahs is so important on Shabbos, so we give prominence and importance to it and respect to it, so it should be whole. If you don't have whole, then you make on broken, but you're supposed to have 2 whole challahs, and Pesach night is the same thing. However, Pesach night there's an additional concept that you're supposed to say the Haggadah, and you're supposed to have a broken piece of matzah there. Because, as we'll talk about later, a very important lesson from it, but you're supposed to have matzah, because matzah is also referred to as the poor man's bread. We'll see why we have to have poor man's bread in a minute, but in a few minutes I should say. But it's supposed to be poor man's bread, and the Talmud says that a poor man never has a complete loaf of bread. That's a sign of poverty. You never have a complete loaf, right? So therefore there's supposed to be a poor man's bread, which is why we actually break the middle matzah, right? So we start off with 3 matzahs, but then we break the middle matzah early on in the Haggadah, so that when we say the story, there should be a broken piece of matzah on the table, and we eat that broken piece of matzah later when we say hamotzi, and then the other half we eat for the afikoman, etc. But so you have to always have 2 whole ones, but then you also have to have a broken one. So therefore we have 3. That's the simple halachic reason. But there's other reasons. There's a reason of Kohen, Levi, Israel, as Rabbi mentioned. There's Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov.
So you're saying that we put 2 whole and 1 broken one?
No, we put 3, and then at the beginning of the Seder we break 1.
No, I know that, but I thought...
Right, but we break 1 in order there should be a broken piece while we say the Haggadah, but we're not making the bracha on the whole one. So then later we're going to eat the broken one only.
But I thought the way you were talking...
No. You break the broken. You break the middle one, which is whole, at the beginning. But so in order to make sure that when eventually you go and wash and you have the bracha of the hamatzi, you're making hamatzi on 2 whole matzahs like you do every Shabbat and every other, right?
So what is it for the afikoman? Don't you have that other one?
Yeah. So, but the idea is you have to have a broken piece. So the way the custom became is that the afikoman is taken from that middle matzah, all kinds of reasons and interpretations, but it started off with the idea of having a broken piece of matzah. So you take a whole one, then you break a piece, the big one you put away for the afikoman, as we'll soon talk about, and that's how it ends up like 2.5 on the Seder plate, the other half hidden somewhere until we eat afikoman. Okay. Now, that's all very nice. And there's one of the Gaonim in like the 6th, 7th century who gave a reason, because we have in a tradition that Yitzchak, our patriarch, Yitzchak was born on Pesach, because what happened was the Pesach before was when Abraham circumcised himself, and then God came to visit him, and then 3 angels appeared, the story of the Chumash, and the angels told him that in a year from now you will have a son. And when the angels came, Avraham Avinu was so excited there were visitors, he ran to Sarah and he said, quick, take 3 measures of flour and make ugot, it says, cakes, which our tradition tells us was actually matzah, right? They told her 3 measures of flour, and this all happened on Pesach, and therefore another reason why we have three matzahs. Okay. But really, all this is fantastic and very beautiful, but there's a huge question here to get to where I want to go. There's a huge question, because why do we eat matzah? Matzah is a symbol of freedom. Symbol of when the Jews went out of Egypt, they couldn't have time to bake bread, didn't have time to rise, the whole thing. That's what we say in Haggadah. That's the simple reason that every kindergarten child knows, that we eat matzah because when the Jews went out of Egypt, that's what happened. They baked matzah because they didn't have time to bake proper bread, didn't rise, so they ate matzah. And because we're celebrating the Exodus from Egypt and we're celebrating the freedom, right, we eat matzah. Now, why do we, before we get to the matzah, the 3 again, let's go back a second, talk about the 4 cups of wine. Why do we drink 4 cups of wine? And, why do we drink wine altogether? Why is there cups? Why is there any number of cups of wine? Because wine is also a symbol of freedom. People who are royalty, who have freedom, who can relax and eat some, and drink some l'chaim, so to speak, that's a sign of freedom. So the 4 cups is also a symbol of freedom, right? Now the question is, we explained why there's 3 cups of wine, but 3 matzahs, sorry. Why is there 4 cups of wine? You know?
Another 4 sons.
Yes, the Imahot is one of them. So 4 sons maybe. There are lots of 4s in the Seder, that's correct. But the primary reason is, right? The primary reason is because in the Torah, when God came and he told Moses he's going to free the Jewish people, he used 4 expressions of freedom. He said, V'hotzeiti, I'm going to take you out. V'hitzalti, I'm going to save you. V'ga'alti, I'm going to redeem you. And then V'lakachti etchem la'am, I will take you as a nation. So we know that there's a concept of the 4 lashonot shel geula, the 4 expressions of redemption. And that's why when the rabbis instituted this mitzvah of drinking 4 cups of wine, they said there should be 4 cups of wine, because the 4 cups of wine correspond to the 4 expressions of redemption. Yep. You can share these things by your Seder. When you say. I will take you out.
Yeah, I will take you out.
I will save you. I will redeem you. And then I will take you as a nation. Okay? So now the question is, this is a question that the Lubavitcher Rebbe raises. Yes?
I know that you broke the middle matzah.
Yeah.
But why?
Oh. That's a whole nother shir. We'll get to it. Towards the end, I'm going to talk about breaking the matzah. I'll come back to it. Hopefully if there's time. Okay. So now the Lubavitcher Rebbe raises the question like this. If it's so important to have 4 cups of wine because we have 4 expressions of geula, redemption. In other words, if we remember the redemption in a way, we drink cups of wine because it's like a redemption thing. It's freedom, right? That's what wine is a symbol of. I'm an important person now. I'm no longer a prisoner, right? So if it's important to remember the redemption and the freedom of Pesach, the Exodus from Egypt in a way where you correspond and you remember and you connect to the 4 expressions of redemption, and we eat matzah because of redemption, so why do we have 4 matzahs? Simple question. We should have 4 matzahs then. I mean, that would be a whole other genre of learning because we have all these reasons why there's 3, but essentially we have to go back to the core of the issue. We're eating matzah because of freedom, we're drinking wine because of freedom. Wine, we have 4 because it's the 4 expressions of Geula, of redemption. So why don't we have 4 matzahs? Right?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, good question, right? You agree? Excellent.
I like that one.
Yes.
God knew that the diocese would struggle with.
Sorry?
God knew that we'd struggle with 3, so I.
Yeah, I know.
That's an even better answer.
Yeah. Although I have to tell you, we say that it's the same as matzahs, they left to Egypt, but they didn't quite make it like we make it. We're a bit over strict, we're not experts in how to manage it, so we make this very thin, crispy matzah, which some people don't like. I actually love matzah, but it doesn't love me, that's the only problem. But yeah. Anyway, okay. So here's an idea. The idea goes like this. If you look at, we've said something similar in the past, but I want to do it a little bit differently today. We've said when we look at those 4 expressions of redemption, right? The 4th one is very different to the first 3. Oh. The first 3 is what we're going away from, right? The last one is what we are becoming, what we're going to. Right, you got that?
Yep.
Now, the truth is like this. You have to understand the historic context a little bit here, and the spiritual context. When the Jews left Egypt, right, they were actually very assimilated. In fact, they were so assimilated, they were in the 40, we are taught that Kabbalistically there's like 50 levels of impurity, and if you get to the 50th, it's like almost a point of no return. But they had sunken so low that they had managed to reach the 49th level of impurity. Mitzrayim, Egypt was a very bad place historically, and therefore the concept of Egypt, or everything in the physical, manifests itself in the spiritual. So Mitzrayim means a very dark, spiritually dark place, immoral place, terrible place, a place of suffering, a place of darkness, right? And the way the Jewish people were, they actually didn't deserve Exodus, really, at that point. They deserved it because they had faith. They deserved it because there was a promise to the patriarchs and the matriarchs that would happen. There was a promise because they deserved it because they were going to be ultimately land up at Mount Sinai and become God's nation and receive the Torah. But actually in their state, in their spiritual state, they had no ability, they had no spiritual ability to become free. Right? And yet we received the gift of freedom. Now what does that mean? So one of the things that we are taught is that Pesach, the Exodus, was freedom which was a complete gift. It was not an earned freedom. It was not a freedom that we had to work for. It was a gift of freedom. God gave us the ability to be free. Our identity changed on Pesach. We were born as a nation who can be free, as a nation who can make choices, as a nation who can choose right from wrong, as a nation who could free themselves from themselves, but it wasn't our own doing. We were quite passive when we left Egypt, right? In other words, we didn't really feature. God did all the work, right? Now, what's interesting is that when you look at the letters, when you look at the numbers of 3 and 4, right? Taking it back to the Talmud, when you have a relationship, right? And there's a giver and there's a receiver, right? So we know that Gimel, the letter Gimel, which is the numerical value is 3, represents the giver. The letter 4 represents the receiver. Okay? You'll see where I'm going in a minute. Okay? I know. I could see the look on your face. So, right? In fact, the Talmud says that Gimel and Daled is like the idea of charity, and it says Gomel Dalim. Gomel means you give to, Dalim those that are poor. Gomel you give to, that's the Gimel, the giving, the giver. Dalim is the poor person receiving the gift, and that's Daled, Dalim, the letter Daled, right? Receiver. So Gimel and Daled is giver and receiver, right? When God took us out of Egypt, He gave us that gift to be free. Okay. So He gave us the gift to let go, to be free of the servitude of Mitzrayim, the persecution, the slavery, in a spiritual sense, not just a physical sense, right? So we were free. We weren't under the Egyptian control no longer, right? But he was doing all the work. So really, if you look at the 4 expressions of redemption, the emphasis was the first 3, not the 4th. We didn't become a nation yet. We were a passive nation, but that's not what becoming a nation means. When God said, I'm going to take you for a nation, he meant was, you need to do the work now. You have to show up, right? Which is why, by the way, the purpose of the exodus from Egypt on Pesach was, the goal of Pesach is Shavuot, okay? That's the fact. The goal of Pesach is Shavuot. What do I mean? Yeah, because the goal of Pesach was, as God told Moses by the burning bush, when he sent him to be a leader, you know the whole story, when Moses was at the burning bush and God appointed him as a leader, and he sent him back to Egypt, right? And he said, when you take the Jewish people out of Egypt, they will then serve me on this mountain. Meaning that's when they're really going to become my nation. Nationhood was born on Pesach, but actually nationhood actually became when? When did it happen? On Shavuot, at Mount Sinai, right? Why didn't it happen right away? Because God said it can't happen right away. I can take you out, I can make sure you're not under the control of Egypt, but you'll still be completely passive, and that's not real freedom. You won't be under the control of anyone else anymore. You won't be under control of Egypt or Pharaoh, of the impurity, of the evil, of the immorality. You can disassociate from that. But you won't be a real nation yet unless you put in the work. And you can't put in the work now because you're not ready. So God said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you out of Egypt and I'm going to give you seven weeks. That's the Omer, right? The counting of the Omer. 7 weeks. Why 7 weeks? Because our personality is laid in 7 levels. As we know, the main part of our personality is our emotions. We have 7 emotions.
7 years or 7 weeks?
7 weeks. It was a crash course. Okay. It wasn't fully effective because they messed up afterward. But anyway, the idea. Sorry?
No,
7 emotions, right? 7 weeks, 7 emotions. And I'm going to give you 7 weeks to refine your 7 emotions, to work with your character, to take responsibility, to become improved on your own, not just passively, but actually actively work to become a better person. Then I can take you as a real nation. Then you can become a nation. Right? And that's why Shavuot is 7 weeks later, not right away. So God gave us the Torah. He took us out in order to give us the Torah, but He only gave it to us 7 weeks later. Because when He gave us the Torah, that's when we become a real nation. But we have to work first. 49 days later, correct. That's why. Actually what happened was, when we left Egypt, only 3 of the 4 expressions really happened. God was doing all the work. I'll take you out of Egypt. I'll redeem you. I'll take you out. Right? I'll disconnect you from the prison that you were in. Yeah? But the 4th one only really happened 7 weeks later. I'll take you as a nation, meaning not just I will take you as a nation, but you'll become a nation. You'll put in the work. You'll own it. You'll own your story. You'll own your choices. You'll become an improved person, a better person. That really only happens 7 weeks later, 49 days later. Right? Now, when I was thinking of today's thing, I knew we at the end of the series of Let Them, right? So I was thinking of a Pesach idea that's connected. So this is the one I came up with, because actually it's very much connected. Because the idea is not quite the way she explains it, but it's actually a little bit like the let them and let me. Right? The let them means I'm no longer under the control of an external circumstance. People don't control me. My friends' comments don't control me. The environment around me doesn't control me. People's perceptions don't control me, right? But as we learned, the let them without the let me is a big problem. So it's a little bit like that. The let them happen, if you want to put it into modern day terminology, the let them happened when we left Egypt. The let me happened by Shavuot. Right? That's when we took responsibility. Let me means I've got to, but in a value-based way, not the way she explains it. In other words, in a spiritual way, in a moral way, in a value-based way. Okay? That's why.
How does she explain it?
No, the let me, she goes very back into me, what makes me feel good, what works for me. And we explained last week, it's not what works for me, it's about what's right. I'm choose what's right, yeah. Which is very much part of Pesach. I'm free to do what's right. I'm free to make.
What I didn't like about the book when I first read it.
Yeah, yes,
before
it's
we ever had this discussion.
yeah. Well, that's it. It's an excellent model. Just that it's missing. That component is definitely missing. Yeah. So therefore, like this. Therefore, because on Pesach only the first three really happened, the first three expressions, because we weren't able to become a nation, take responsibility just yet. So therefore, there's only three matzahs. The three matzahs are three. Why? Because the number three matzahs is what the work that God does, the giver. But the receiver is very passive at that stage. We haven't shown up yet. However, already on Pesach, we remind ourselves what's the goal. The goal is not just the first three. The goal is for us to become a nation. The goal is we're given 7 weeks to work towards a goal that we're actually going to work on ourselves. We're going to show up. We're going to take responsibility. We're going to put in the effort. And that's why there's a mitzvah on Pesach night also to drink 4 cups of wine. In other words, 3 matzahs is what happened. The 4 cups of wine is where we're going to end up. Follow me? Yeah. Therefore, we do both. Now, I must tell you that actually this is quite phenomenal because first of all, it fits into the 3 and the 4. Remember, 3 is giving, 4 is receiving. Generally, we say, and it's not for now to go in detail, we've done this before, 3 is, giving is a masculine thing. That's the masculine part of the person. Receiving is the feminine part of the person. That's why we have 3 matzahs for the 3 fathers, 4 cups of wine for the 4 mothers. It's the giving and the receiving. It's the giver and the receiver. Also, what's very interesting is the following. And this fits into the whole idea. I just want to tell you the whole idea, not just to, I don't want to sell you short, so I want to give you the whole thing, right? So, also, it's interesting, matzah by definition doesn't have a taste, as you probably noticed, right? Right?
It's all right with butter and jam.
But the Seder's got to be pure matzah, by the way, right? A big piece of shur matzah without any embellishment. In fact, there is a concept which is called matzah ashira, like rich man's matzah, which is matzah not made of water, it's made of flour and eggs or flour and juice, which in the Ashkenazi world we don't use on Pesach, but even though the Sephardim we do use it, but not for the Seder. You don't fulfill the mitzvah of eating matzah on the Seder if you eat that because it's got a taste. It's not supposed to have a taste, right? And yet wine, on the contrary, in the halakha tells us that when you buy wine for the Seder, you should buy yayin mishubach, you should buy a good wine. I mean, that's subjective a little bit because everyone relates to a different type of wine. But why? Because it should have a good taste. Freedom, right? So how does that fit into the concept we just said? You see, when freedom is given to you and you're not doing any of the work, you're just surrendering. Surrendering means you're just following. You're going with the flow. God took us out and we followed. There's no enjoyment in that. There's no meaning. There's no, I don't know how to say it in English. In Yiddish you say geschmack, right? There's no geschmack in that. There's no because there's nothing like earning something yourself, exploring it yourself, understanding it yourself, taking responsibility for it yourself. It's hard work, but it's pleasurable. Which is why when we left Egypt, we were just passive. Therefore we eat matzah, 3, that's the giver, because only was God's job. The first 3 expressions. And it has no taste because we didn't understand, we didn't relate to it yet. When can we relate to it? When we put in the 4th component. The 4th component is the wine. It's a taste. Then we start to explore it. We start to explain it. We start to understand it. We start to enjoy it. The first step is surrender, but the ultimate goal is to be present, is to be part of it, to be a contributor, to be part of the process, not just to be passive. And part of the process means that you learn and you understand and you work on yourself and you become a better person and you understand greater insights, you understand the meaning of what you're doing, and then it becomes pleasurable. There's a taste, there's a geschmack, there's really an enjoyment of what you're doing, and that's why wine specifically has to have a taste, and matzah specifically must not have a taste. Right? By the way, you know that in the Ashkenazi world at least, you know that we have this idea of no taste of matzah. I don't know if you know this. You know how every Friday night and every Chag we have 2 challahs and we dip the challah in salt. Right? And we don't dip the matzah in salt. Do you know that? It's got to be pure matzah. That's it. Pure, tasteless matzah. Right? No. You can dip it in salt the next day, but by the Seder you don't dip it in salt. Right? Okay. I'll add one more concept in this also where you see this, right? You know, we have different mitzvot, different halachot, different laws that we're supposed to follow in Judaism. And one way of separating them is whether they are the biblical mitzvot and they are rabbinic mitzvot. Now, the Torah says we need to listen to the rabbinic mitzvot, but they're still obligatory, but they are different. So, matzah, it says in the Torah to eat matzah. It's a biblical mitzvah, right? 4 cups of wine doesn't say in the Torah. It's not a biblical mitzvah. It's a rabbinic mitzvah, right? It was one of the additions that the rabbis added later in the times of the Sanhedrin. They added this mitzvah of drinking 4 cups of wine. What's
I
it?
was wondering about that.
Yeah.
I almost said to you, how do you know that? That there were 4.
No.
Usually.
No. Well, it's all in the Talmud. We'll have to have another lesson on that, how you work it out. But okay. But the bottom line is that matzah is a biblical mitzvah, and 4 cups of wine is a rabbinic mitzvah, right? And the way God structured the Torah, He left room for rabbinic mitzvot. There has to be rabbinic mitzvot. And the Midrash says that although, in a way, the biblical mitzvot are stricter than the rabbinic mitzvot, but there's a Midrash which says that God says, I love the rabbinic mitzvot even better than my own mitzvot, the biblical ones. Why? What's the difference between a biblical mitzvah and a rabbinic mitzvah? A biblical mitzvah is imposed on us. God said you have to do it. A rabbinic mitzvah is one that we create as a nation. So therefore, when we turn to the number 4, and we become a nation, we've taken responsibility, we're part of the process, obviously under the guidance and the values that God prescribed, but nevertheless, we become an active partner, a responsible partner, one that's doing some of the work. That's expressed in number 4, but it's also expressed in a rabbinic mitzvah rather than a biblical mitzvah. Yeah, you got that?
Yeah.
So that's why. There's 4 expressions, let's just summarize. There's 4 expressions of redemption. The first 3 is God doing the work. And that's actually what happened at Pesach time. The 4th one is we take an active role and become a nation through understanding, through self-refinement, through contributing, through being active, through being interested. And that's what God really wants. He doesn't want us to be passive, ultimately. We had to be in Pesach because we weren't on the level, we weren't deserving of being an active partner, so we had to start off with just total surrender. Right? So that's, the number 3 is giving, the number 4 is receiving, so the receiver becomes part of the equation. Matzah doesn't have a taste, that's the nature of surrender. 4 cups of wine have a taste, that's the nature of being an active member. When you enjoy it, you're part of it, you enjoy it, you understand it, you appreciate it. And matzah is a biblical mitzvah because it's given to us, it's the giver, and we just follow it. And 4 cups of wine is a rabbinic mitzvah that we created, a symbol of us being a partner. Right? So why is this so important? Important is that we need to understand, in terms of experiencing our own freedom, what the nature of Pesach is all about. What does it mean to experience freedom? So we have to understand these 2 stages. We have to understand that the first stage is surrendering. First stage is letting go of our ego. The first stage is just not understanding and letting God do the work and surrendering to His truth. But remembering that the ultimate goal of that is that you have to become active, you have to learn, and you have to understand, not just follow. You have to become part of the equation. You have to be a partner in the relationship between us and God. Yes, we're the receiver, but we have to become an active receiver. One that's part of the equation, and that's why we drink the 4 cups of wine, to remind us what the goal is. Yes, the matzah stage comes first, 3 becomes before 4, but we have to understand the goal is the 4 as well. Okay, now, so how do we do this, right? So the first stage we said is matzah. So matzah, as we know, we've talked about this a lot. Matzah, the symbol of matzah is surrender. What does that mean? Surrendering ourself, essentially, right? We give up ourself. We give up, we let go of the ego. That's what it is, right? And therefore, that stage is so important. We might not be active yet, we might not be even deserving, but we allow God to give us that gift so that we can let go of our freedom, of our ego. And that's why we have this idea that on Pesach, matzah is so important because it doesn't rise. Rising is a symbol of self, symbol of negative self, a symbol of ego. Right? We've talked about this many times. And matzah doesn't rise even a drop, means that we've let go of our ego, right? Because in order to become free, you have to let go of something completely, let go of the constraints completely, because if you're a little bit connected, Like a little bit of ego is also not good because you have to let go completely. I'm surrendering. Again, later then we have to bring back self and enjoy it, and as we talked about. But the first thing is to let go of the ego. One of the ways that's expressed, and we've said this a number of times, but it's one of my favorites, so I'm just going to repeat it anyway, if that's okay. So we know that the word chametz, which is leavened bread, and matzah is very similar. Remember this? They have very similar letters. Two of them are exactly the same. So chametz is chet mem tzadik, but the differential letter is chet, right? And matzah is, sorry for my primitive visuals, is mem tzadik hey. So the mem is the same and the tzadik is the same. The only difference is the hey, right? So the difference between chametz and matzah, is chet and hey. Yeah, sure, you can take it if you want. All right?
We can't see.
Oh, you can see? This is the chet. Can't see it? No? All right, look in a prayer book. No, so essentially, I'll do it like this. So chet, the word chet, chametz, right, is two. If I explain it, you'll see what I mean. It's two legs, a top, and no bottom, right? Matzah is also the same thing. The hay is the same thing. Two legs, a top, and no bottom, but the left leg doesn't reach the top. Okay, that's the difference. That's one little opening, right? What's the idea? The bottom, the empty bottom, is a sign of failure when you drop out of the system, right? Now, two things happen when a person fails. One has to do with our ego, one doesn't have to do with our ego. One is selflessness or letting go of the ego. Some people, when they fail, finished. I'm done, I'm not changing, I'm not fixing, I'm not returning. This is me. You want to call it a failure, but I'm not doing any work to reconnect or improve or do tshuva or fix or amend or whatever the case is, right? I am who I am, as people like to say. Accept me the way I am. A very non-Jewish concept. Anyways, no. What I mean to say is...
It's a very selfish concept.
Correct. It's a very selfish concept. Now, we should accept people as they are and not be judgmental. That's true. But we shouldn't demand it of others. I'll tell you why. Because actually we shouldn't accept ourselves as we are. Now, I must qualify that because obviously we accept that we all have an intrinsic worth and we all have an intrinsic neshama and we all have an intrinsic value. And God loves us unconditionally. That is true. There is a level where God does accept us unconditionally and accepts us the way we are, but He wants us to change. So the two things are not contradictory. Right? So the person who has ego fails. We all make mistakes. Human beings make mistakes. The ego person is either he says, I never ever made a mistake, like is total denial, or the ego says, yes, I did, but who cares? Yes, I got angry yesterday, that's their problem. If they feel bad, so that's their problem. I'm not taking responsibility for it. I don't have anything I need to do for it, right? That's the egocentric response. The spiritual response, the less ego response is, no, I failed, that's okay. But I can come back, I can work hard and reconnect. And that's the difference between the chet and the hay. The chet falls out of the letter, right? But there's no way back in. I'm not going back in. The hay says, I fell out of the bottom, but there's a window that I can climb back in. There's always a window to come back in. I got to climb, I got to work hard. It's effort. I got to take responsibility. I can do it, but I can climb back in. That's the difference between chet and hay. That's why matzah ends in a hay and chet begins in a chametz. Chametz begins with a chet, because chametz is the ego, and that's the person who will not climb back in. But the matzah is the person who's now selfless and surrendering and is prepared to go beyond themselves and to work hard and to say, no, I think I'm limited by what I did. I think I'm limited by habit, and I think I'm limited by previous experiences, but I'm actually not. Freedom means I'm actually not limited. I can go beyond my comfort zone and improve and grow and come back in. Now, I want to share with you a beautiful idea. Someone asked before why we break the middle matzah. I have a better question for you. Why do we break matzah altogether? If you have to have a broken piece, there's plenty of broken pieces in the box, just take a broken piece and put it on the table. Right? Why do you have to break a piece of matzah? So the middle matzah, by the way, is lots of reasons. One of them is Kabbalistically, because the three matzahs also correspond to Chesed, Gevura, and Tiferet. And we know gevura is a very, very complicated emotion because it can turn out really bad, it can turn out really good. The middle one is gevura, but we know when we channel it in the right way and we discipline the gevura itself, it becomes sweet. And that's why the idea of breaking the matzah is the idea of neutralizing the gevura so we can channel it in a positive way. That's one idea. The other idea is that the three matzahs correspond to the Kohen, the Levi, and the Israel, the three types of Jews. And traditionally, the Leviim, the Levi, were always poor. Because why? Because when Jews went into the land of Israel, it was an agricultural land. They were all allotted a piece of land, except for the tribe of Levi, right? They actually lived in like some sort of housing commission system, because they were teachers. They had to go travel the country and just teach. No, teachers are never the most wealthiest of people, as we know, overworked and underpaid. But they so that's why. So they were also less. They were always less wealthy. So when we want to make one piece of matzah a poor man's bread, we use the middle matzah, the Levi. Okay, many other reasons, but let's go do it. Yitzchak, the whole thing. Okay, but I want to talk about why we have to break matzah altogether. So we said that matzah is poor man's bread, right? I've answered this question a different way before, but I'm going to share with you a new idea. At the Seder, before we break the matzah, if you remember how the Haggadah works, when we wash the first time that we eat a vegetable, right? A potato, parsley, whatever we do in salt water. And then we break the middle matzah. And then what do? We start the Haggadah. How does the Haggadah start, if you remember? No, actually it doesn't start with Avodim. It starts with Let me say before, that's before Kiddush even. I'm saying, how does the Haggadah start in terms of the recitation, right? So we say this paragraph, a very interesting paragraph. We say this paragraph that we turn to the matzah, we look at the matzah and we say, this is the bread of affliction that our forefathers ate in the land of Egypt. And then we start inviting people. All those that are hungry should come and eat. First of all, that's a bizarre place to put that paragraph. It's very nice. I mean, you've come home from shul or wherever you're coming home from and you've closed the doors, you've locked the door. Especially nowadays, we're all security conscious, so the doors are all locked. We sit down with our family to the Seder and then we say, you know what? Invitation. Whoever wants to come eat, please come. I mean, that's like ridiculous. If you want to make that announcement, make it in shul. Put out an email 2 weeks before Pesach. Whoever wants to come to my Seder, come to my Seder. Now you're inviting people? Well, it's like a bizarre thing, right? And then we say it right after we say it's poor man's bread. Like halach, it's a bread of affliction, right? So I saw an idea that is unbelievable, I think anyways, from an author called the Kolba, who lived around the 13th, 14th century. And he says, what's going on here? First of all, why is matzah poor man's bread? I thought matzah was to remember the freedom, right? Now you have to understand, we call it poor man's bread for some reason, but actually when the Jews left Egypt, they were not poor. They were not poor at all. They actually left with a lot of stuff. I mean, they were slaves for 210 years, but actually, why? Because there was this whole thing when God first came to Abraham, 430 years before they left Egypt. And there was the famous vision which you read about in the Chumash, and God said, there will come a time where your children will have to be slaves in a foreign land. But don't worry, he said to Abraham, after this, it's very important for them to prepare for the giving of the Torah, whatever it is. But after that, I will take them out, biruchush gadol, with an amazing amount of wealth. And therefore, if you know the story of the 10 plagues, before right, God said that when they leave Egypt, I'll go back 10 plagues in a second. So God said when the 10th plague came, before the 10th plague happened and Pharaoh was going to send the Jews out of Egypt, God said to the people, he said to Moses to ask the people, everyone when they go out, the Egyptians by that point are going to just freely let the people go, but everyone should ask their neighbors for payment for the last 210 years of slavery. And they should say, give me your gold, give me your silver, give me your candelabra, give me this, give me that, right? So they were actually quite well off. And in fact, we are taught an interesting thing, because God knew what's going to happen is the Egyptians are going to try to get out of it, right? And they're going to say, silver candelabra, I don't have any, gold jewelry, who said I have? I don't have anything. So God made that in the plague of darkness, the Egyptians couldn't move and couldn't see a thing, and for the Jews it was completely light, and that's when the Jews had a look at the Egyptian houses to find out where everything is, so that later on, when they left Egypt, they should be able to Say, no, I know exactly what you have. Can we have it, please? And the Egyptians gave it up. Bottom line is, the Jews were not poor when they left Egypt. They were not poor. So what's this matzah, poor man's bread? What's that all about? It's supposed to be a symbol of freedom. And we're eating poor man's bread. Broken pieces of bread. So he says the idea is like this. Beautiful idea. He says, yes, they weren't poor, but when they actually left, they were behaving like poor people. Why? Because God said, you've got to collect all these things, all good, but you need to leave quickly. That's one of the big themes of the Haggadah. That they had to, because the time came for them to leave, they had already reached the 49th level of impurity. God said, this is your moment. Midnight happens, your gift of freedom is given to you, and the next morning you get out of there. You go, you move, quickly. Right? And there was this whole thing about that. They had a Seder the night before and they had to eat the meat of the Korban Pesach, and they had to eat it dressed like, and with their belts on their thing, and they had to be like a person who's in a rush. The redemption of Egypt, there's a whole learning behind the rush, but they ate rushed, right? So what did they do? The next morning they were rushing. That's part of the story of matzah. So what did they do? They quickly got to make bread. No, they couldn't make a very elaborate recipe, so a bit of flour and water. They couldn't even let it rise. They baked it and it was right. Says the Kolbo, you think everyone managed to do that? Not everyone managed it. There were plenty of people, older people, weak people, sick people, I don't know. You think everyone managed to bake bread at that speed? Even to bake matzah? He said what happened was that actually what ended up happening as they were leaving, a lot of them had what to eat. They had matzah at least. And a lot of them had nothing. So what did the Jews do? They broke their matzah and they gave the bigger piece to other people. They left with kindness. And therefore, says the Kolba, that's why we make matzah the poor man's bread. And that's why we break matzah. We break the middle matzah like the Jews did. And that's why we make the announcement, all those that are hungry should come and eat. We don't mean it as an invitation for the Seder. Inviting people for the Seder is a very nice thing, but not at the Seder table. Do it before, do it now, do it today, right? But we're not inviting people to the Seder. We are recounting, we're remembering what the Jews said. We break the matzah, we say, you know why we're breaking the matzah? Because that's what the Jews did when they left Egypt. They looked around, and everyone looked around who had a piece of matzah, what they had baked very quickly, and they saw someone who didn't have matzah. So they broke their piece. Not only did they share when they didn't have very much to eat, they had plenty of jewelry and gold and silver, never allowed to eat, right? Not only did they share, but you know how we break the middle matzah, we put away the bigger half, it says, for the afikoman. Why do we do that? He says, because that's what they did. They shared the bigger half. They put someone else first before themselves, right? And that's how the sequence goes at the Seder. We break the middle matzah, and then we say, you know why we're breaking the middle matzah? Because this is the poor man's bread, which they ate in Egypt, and it was poor man's bread because they had very little. And not only was it poor man's bread that everyone had, some of them didn't have, and therefore they needed them to make the announcement, all those that are hungry should come and eat. Not that we're doing it, the Jews did it. Then, what's the depth of the story? Not that just it was kindness. The depth of the story was that the Jews understood what was happening. What is real kindness? What is kindness when you even give a bigger half to someone else? That means you're making space for another person. You're letting go of your ego. That's chesed. That's true kindness. True kindness says, I don't have that much either, but I want to make sure you have. And sometimes even the bigger half. Right? And that's when God saw this is working. He's giving them the gift of freedom. They're able to put someone else before their ego. They're able to make space for someone else. Yes, of course they have to remain with themselves also, right? But that's what it's all about. It was in line with the theme of matzah. The theme of matzah is letting go of your ego, and the Jews got it. And we remember that. Not only remember that, we try to apply it to our own lives. That part of letting go of the ego means not just making room for God, but we start by making room for others. And that's symbolized and experienced at the Seder by breaking a piece of matzah like the Jews did to give the poor man's bread to someone who didn't even have that. And that's the kindness. And when I'm thinking about that, I just can't help myself to tell you a story, which I'm sure I've told you many times. But maybe you don't always remember that. We always need a bit of revision, so I'm going to tell you a beautiful, beautiful story. It was after the war, and a lot of Jews we know had gone back to their places of origin, right? They tried at least, and after a while, it sort of didn't work and went to other countries like Australia and America and so on. But there was a lot of Jews that went back to Romania. And in Romania, there was a community, it was just after the war, it was Pesach after the war. And there were two Hasidic Rebbes there. One was the Skulena Rebbe, who was known as a very, very kind person. And one was the Vizhnitzer Rebbe, both head of great Hasidic sects. Vizhnitz, you heard of Vizhnitz? Eli Wiesel came from a Vizhnitz family, right? The Skulena Rebbe, he really was worried there wouldn't be matzah, shmura matzah for Pesach. It was a very tough time. It was just 6 months after the war, whatever it was. And he managed to get together a group of people. He managed to get wheat. He managed to get flour. He managed to get an oven. And they baked, but it was a very minimal amount of matzah. So he let the community know that there will be matzah for everyone, but everyone should know they should come get some matzah a few days before Pesach. And we are giving every family 3 matzahs, and that's it. For the Seder, there's not going to be enough. There's not going to be more than that. 3 matzahs for 1 Seder. And just each one should take a piece of matzah and eat it, but that's what's going to happen. Okay. A couple of days before Pesach, the son of the Vizhnitzer Rebbe shows up. And he says, I want to take matzah for my family, but my father, the Vizhnitzer Rebbe, said, I have to get 6 matzahs. The Rebbe is like wondering, I mean, why? Like, it's very clear why each person is only getting 3 matzahs. And why is he asking for 6? He says, but you know, it's not enough. He says, no, my father says I must not leave you until I get 6 matzahs. So he figures the Vizhnitzer Rebbe is a big tzaddik. He doesn't know, he can't argue with him. So he made an exception and he gave him the 6 matzahs. Fast forward a few days, just before candle lighting on Erev Pesach, there's again a knock on the door. Who is it? The Vizhnitzer Rebbe's son, same person. And he came back with 3 matzahs. He said, well, I gave you asked for 6. He said, you have to have 6. So the Vizhnitzer Rebbe said to him, do you have 3 matzahs? And he had to be honest. He didn't have for himself. He gave out to every single family in Romania, in the Romanian, in his community, to the point that he didn't even keep 3 for himself. Which meant, for the Skulena Rebbe means he was giving himself, not just he didn't have matzah, he could eat other things, but he was giving up the mitzvah, and for him the mitzvah was very important. Why am I more important than you? She gave out every matzah. So the Vizhnitzer Rebbe's son said, my father knew you were going to do that. So he sent me a few days before and he insisted that I take 6 matzahs. So that I can come back now and give you 3, so you should have 3 for the Seder. 2 great men, 2 thinking of each other, 2 thinking of the other person in different ways. That's really the essence of Pesach. Because why? Because kindness is about letting go of the ego, manifests itself first and foremost about making room for someone else and being kind to someone else, even sometimes to put someone else first. Not always, but even sometimes put someone else first. And that's the essence of Pesach, and that's the essence of freedom. Being free to do that, being free not to be trapped in your own ego. Once again, I want to wish everyone first of all... Sorry?
Is there any reason why we have 2 Seders?
That's because there's a second Yom Tov outside of Israel. That's a whole other discussion why that is, but we'll leave that for now.
Just on the business, Rabbi, if anybody's been, you've got to go to Israel, you've got to go to BINA on the Thursday night to get the halal business.
Vizhnitz Bakery is one of the most famous bakeries.
It is an incredible experience.
I want to wish everyone a real Chag Sameach, Chag Kasher Sameach. Again, if you don't have Shmura Matzah, please let me know. And because it's got to be baked for the sake of the mitzvah, and it's got to be baked, and it's just better because it's baked the way it was always baked.
My experience is that every time you go to open that box 10 minutes before you can put the table, they're always
Which ones do you get? There's ones that are better than others. The ones that are...
well, I mean,
Yeah.